Tongzhe is presenting on the impact of expiration date labels on food. So a very important and sort of policy relevant topic, looking at sort of how what role expiration date labels can play. Tongzhe is the director of the Food, Agriculture, and Resource Economics Lab for Experimental and Applied Economics at the University of Guelph, and we're really happy to have you, Tongzhe. So I'll pass it over to you.
All right, thanks everyone. Let me just share my screen. All right. Can everybody see the screen? Right. Okay, great. Well, so first of all, welcome everyone. We just realized this is a national holiday in both the US and in Canada. So, well, happy holidays and thanks for joining us. So today, what I'm going to talk about is the impact of expiration dates on hedonic markets for perishable products, aka how consumers respond to expiration dates on food packages. This is joint work with Kent Messer and Harry Kaiser, and I am from the University of Guelph in Ontario, Canada. All right. So a little background, why did we study this topic? Food retailers use expiration dates to mitigate consumer concerns about food safety for a long time. Nevertheless, millions of consumers throw out perfectly safe food because they believe it is not safe to eat after the date on the package. So, researchers argue that perishable food products are thrown away after the label date mainly because consumers do not understand what the date means. And to address this misunderstanding, some have advocated for standardizing the language used to so that the intent of the date is clear. And at the time when we conducted this experiment, the three options considered by the grocery manufacturers and retailers were best if used by, use by, and expires on. What motivated us to actually conduct this experiment was because we saw this picture at the time, okay? So people still ask themselves that question, to eat or not to eat? And how do we decode expiration dates? So for a long time, people just see the date and they thought the food probably wasn't safe to eat and they throw it away. But then with the effort to actually decode the expiration dates and come up with different standard date languages, will people actually respond to them and how will people respond to them? So here's a screenshot that we took, okay? So it directs people how to actually decode the expiration date. So you can see the three expiration date labels are here, okay? So best if used by, we're actually just telling people the manufacturers and the industry believe that this is really easy for people to understand. And this is actually with the emphasis on the best qualifier in this term. It means that the product should retain maximum freshness, flavor, and texture if used by this date. And this is not the purchased by or safety date, okay? And beyond this date, the product begins to deteriorate, although it may still be edible, okay? And then if you move on to the next proposed date, which is the use by date, and this term has a similar meaning to best if used by date. It means that the product will have the best qualities if used by this date noted. And then if you move on to expiration dates, okay, if you see expires on, usually that has a different meaning. Well, it's not only about the best if used by date. However, some states require this expiration date on meat or milk, okay? So you can imagine it has some indication on the safety of food products. But again, how will consumers respond to these different labels with such education intended for them? So this is exactly why we conducted our experiment and our specific research objectives, okay? First, we wanted to investigate how the presence of expiration dates affects consumers' preferences for perishable food products. And second, we want to examine the effects of 3 types of expiration dates, namely best if used by, and expires on consumer preferences for a food product. So we dug into the literature before designing the details of our experiment. We mainly dug into 2 different streams of literature. The first one is about perishable products. So 2 of the most important characteristics influencing consumer preferences for perishable foods are price and freshness. And a reasonable assumption is that consumer preferences decrease with the price and increase with the freshness of a food product. However, other than a few exceptions, such as day-old bread, we do not often see that older food products, all else equal, are sold at a lower price. So it poses the question, why do we not observe many hedonic markets for perishable food products? And well, could it be that the expiration date labels generally create a flat valuation curve before the expiration dates? Okay, if that is the case, then is that actually why the expiration dates exist? And would the existence of expiration dates, although confusing, help with the market? So that was the question that we wanted to answer reviewing the literature. And the second stream of literature that we dug into are about food waste. Food waste research usually focuses on managing the waste and marketing strategies to discourage wasteful habits. And the latter was what our experiment falls under. Okay, we wanted to study marketing strategies and see how different expiration dates can help people mitigate their wasteful habit in a way. So there is no standard for establishing expiration dates, and most labeled food products are safe to consume long afterward. Okay, so with that in mind, we study how people actually respond to the expiration dates and whether or not different types of expiration dates can actually mitigate wasteful food consumption behavior after the date has passed. So we developed a theoretical model to guide our hypothesis and experimental design. So consider the following elements in the model. Okay, the first element we considered was A naught. Okay, and A naught is the age of a product when it was purchased. So basically, the number of days since production when it was purchased from the grocery store, and then when you purchase the product afterwards, you're going to have it sit in your fridge or in your kitchen for a number of days. So we denoted it by T. So T is the number of days since it was purchased by the consumer. Therefore, the summation of A naught and T is the age of the product when it was consumed by the consumer. The price of that product will therefore depend on the age of the product. Okay, and it is independent of the T. So at the time when the price was set up, it is independent of how long you're going to put it in your fridge or in your kitchen. However, it is dependent of the age of the product while you purchased it from the grocery store. So P of A naught is the hedonic price function, which depends on the product's shelf life. Okay, and we also consider C, the composite good, whose price is non-1. And so, well, without bothering you with the details of the math, so just imagine if we assume the utility function has standard properties and consumers are rational, and we assume that the Krohn-Tucker condition holds with equality, then this is the pretty much the optimization condition with respect to A naught. Okay, so what that means is the first derivative of the price with respect to A naught will depend on 3 different terms. And what we focus here, okay, is the highlighted term. And the highlighted term denotes the marginal effect of the food product's age on consumers' utility. And we will focus on this term in our experiment, and we will build our hypothesis around it. So we came up with 4 null hypotheses and wanted to see how many of them can we reject in our experiment using using the data. So the first one is consumer preferences for perishable products remain the same with decreasing freshness. Okay, and we will see if we can reject that or not. And the second and third are related. Okay, the second one is consumer responses to decreasing freshness are the same before and after the expiration date with the presence of expiration date labels. The third one, they are the same before and after the date without the presence of expiration date labels. And the last hypothesis was consumer responses are the same when different expiration date labels are presented. All right, so with our hypothesis in mind, we actually followed 4 steps to reach what we have today, okay? So the first step was the experimental design, and this step considered research question identification, elicitation mechanism design, power analysis for the sample size, and product availability, which I'm going to talk about in the next slide. And after we went through this long process of experimental design, we went on and registered our experiment on the AEA RCT pre-registration. And then we implemented our design using the BDM auction, and 373 adult individuals participated in the experiment, and all of the activities were conducted on Surface Pros using Python Willow. And the last step, of course, we analyzed the data and prepared for our manuscript. So let me walk you through the experimental design in more details. Okay, so, well, it was actually much harder than I thought to find the products that can support our field experiment. Okay, and this was the one that we finally used. So why it was so hard, and why, if we want to rigorously design this experiment, in my mind, the biggest hurdle was actually to secure the products for the experiment. Okay, so there are 2 conditions we have to meet. Okay, in order to test how people respond to different expiration dates and different ages of a product, okay, we need to test an otherwise identical product with different ages. Okay, so and we also wanted to see if people's responses are the same before and after the expiration dates. So we need the same product before and after the expiration date, okay, and with some variations of the age. And what's even more difficult here is that we also needed to be able to show different expiration date labels without deceiving the participants, right? So we cannot show them, we cannot get a product that says expires on, and we tell our participants that this is actually best if used by. Therefore, it is very difficult for us to actually find some generic labeling with the expiration date, but without the specific language, okay? So, well, for numerous good reasons, deception is not allowed in experimental economics, okay? And also, if the products are not otherwise identical, we cannot clearly attribute any behavioral changes to just the age and the label. So, well, we were super lucky because with a lot of research assistance from numerous undergraduate RAs, we were able to identify and secure this product, okay? As you can see on the label, there is generic date without showing what the date actually means. Okay, we actually called different manufacturers, we called the producers, we called Costco, we called a couple grocery stores. Some told us it was the expiration date, some told us it's best if used by, some told us it's used by. So bingo, we could use this product to demonstrate different languages in the interface that we showed our participants. Okay, and also, well, because at the time we conducted this experiment in Delaware, it is a small state, and we actually were able to drive to different adjacent states in order to secure different dates of the same product. Okay, so consider us lucky, but I think I was really amazed by the fact that we could achieve that and set up an artifactual market to study this topic. Okay, so after we secured the experimental products, okay, so how did we actually communicate with our participants? So this is the interface that each participant saw. in the experiment. Okay, we use the same product, and boxed by the green box here was the between subject treatments, meaning that we actually randomized the selection of participants into different between subject groups, distinguished by the expiration date labels. Okay, so a group of people saw best if used by, a group of people saw expires on, and a group of people saw used by, and a group of people saw the control, so and so forth. Okay, so that was our between subject treatments. And we also had this within subject treatments in random orders that have different dates on it. Okay, so the same participant would see 5 different dates and in random orders. And just a reminder, the experiment was conducted in April, I think 27th in 2017. Okay, so this date varied all the way from April 21st, April 25th, April 27th, April 29th, so on and so forth. And again, this is a within subject treatment. So each participant saw 5 different treatments in randomized orders. Okay, so when the experiment was conducted, the smoothness actually varied by the actual number of days since production. Okay, and that information was provided to the participants in all the between subject treatments. And according to the producer, the stamped date on the package was 50 days after production. So some of the products offered to the participants were beyond the expiration date at the time of purchase. Okay. However, we did call the manufacturer and producers and made sure that the product was still safe to consume after the expiration date. And we confirmed with different sources that the product was still safe to consume 14 days after the expiration date. Okay, so all right, so what are the between subject treatments again? Well, actually, there's a baseline, right, where there's only production dates that are provided. And treatments 2, 3, and 4 were motivated by me in a previous slide. So basically the 3 options considered by the industry at the time. And I feel like I wanted to also motivate this treatment 1 a little bit more, because my understanding is that a lot of my co-authors and collaborators and a lot of American consumers are probably not familiar with this type of label, and why did we test it, okay? So in this treatment 1, what I used was actually the baseline information plus just one note that the shelf life of this product is 50 days, okay, which was what we confirmed from the manufacturer. So why did I introduce this? Why did I insist that we wanted to test this treatment? Well, so my family is sort of from Toronto, and people like me really enjoy its diversity. One of the greatest benefits of diversity is that you can get different kinds of food, right? So we get to buy a lot of different international food. And at the time of this experiment, I recall that many food products we got from international grocery stores actually took this format of labeling in this treatment 1, just to show you some evidence, right? So here's the evidence. I took this picture in our kitchen when I was preparing for this specific talk. So I took this picture last week. Interesting enough, this is actually strawberry yogurt, which we enjoy drinking these days, okay? So as you can see here by the 2 highlights, right? This is strawberry yogurt, okay? And if you move down to the bottom of this label, okay? It says the shelf life of this product is 6 months. And you can't really find what is the production date. So you need to actually find the production date somewhere else on the package, okay? So I thought that was very interesting, because it is very standard that if you get some food products from Asian grocery stores, this is the format that they use. So I wanted to test how people actually respond to this type of expiration date, which is not a normal one that we usually see in the American markets. And I encourage everyone to guess how participants in our experiment responded to this treatment, okay? And as a reminder, most of them are from Mid-Atlantic US. Okay, so, all right. So just refreshing our memory, this was the interface that each participant saw. And if you look at the slider here, okay, so that slider enabled us to elicit participants' variation using a version of the BDM auction. And each participant stated how much we would have to pay them to drink a product, varied by the expiration date and the labels. Okay, so we got asked by some reviewers, so I just wanted to explain this a little bit here. We used this willingness to accept approach instead of willingness to pay approach in this paper mainly for two reasons. One, participants were required to drink the product on site. This is because we didn't want people to actually grab the product and walk around, which can contaminate other potential participants' beliefs of our experiment. So which means, okay, if you have to drink it on site, it is a task. And of course, it is reasonable to think that people would require some compensation when they perform a task. And the second main reason was because some products have already expired at the time we conducted this experiment. And we were a little concerned that we may not be able to observe the variation in their true variation if participants generally just bid zero, just because some of the products already passed the expiration date. Okay, but on a side note, we did introduce two treatments on the site using willingness to pay, and the marginal effects of all treatments are consistent in terms of their sign and statistical significance. And we are actually drafting another paper with Dr. Laura Paul on this, I think, excellent paper. Okay, just to promote it a little bit. But for today's talk, please just stay with me and stay assured that willingness to accept is a viable way to elicit people's variation. Okay, so how did we do that? Okay, how did we use willingness to accept in the BDM to elicit people's variation? So there are mainly three steps, right? The first step, each participant placed a willingness to accept bid on a product, okay, and each of them placed that bid on the slider. And after they place the bid, computer generates a random market price, okay? A random market price anywhere between 0 and 10 in this case. If the market price is higher than the willingness to pay bid, the participant performs the task and receives the compensation at the market price. If the market price is lower than the bid, then the participant does not perform the task nor receives any compensation. So the BDM auction has been shown by many researchers to be variation revealing in experimental settings because they're not bidding with anybody else. They're bidding against some odds of the randomly drawn price. Okay, so utility maximizing subjects should always submit bids that are equal to their true valuation in theory. The mechanism was implemented into the overall experiment. Okay, so participants first signed the consent form once they joined the experiment, and they practiced on the BDM auction that I just talked about to make sure that they understand that their best strategy is to always bid their true valuation on the product. Okay, and then once they were trained and practiced on a series of BDM auctions, participants bid on 5 different products varying by production dates. Okay, so they saw 5 different strawberry smoothies varying by their production dates. And then once they're done with the bidding, they fill out a survey. And after the survey, the computer randomly selected one of the participants' decisions for implementation. And again, without bothering you with more theoretical foundations of this mechanism, this is just designed there to ensure incentive compatibility. Okay, and the last step was that we made the payment based on people's task performance. And people walk away with some cash, drank some yogurt, and happily left. Okay, so the results. Okay, the results. First of all, we looked at the summary statistics of the demographic variables. We see a variation in different demographics. Okay, the average age was about 32 years old, and we see a slightly more female participants, so and so forth, and we see a nice variation of people's education and household income. And then I wanted to draw your interest to this table. So on a 1 to 5 Likert scale, okay, where 1 indicates people completely disagree and 5 indicates people completely agree. And with a sample size of over 300 participants, this is what we saw, okay? So as you can see here from the first row, when we ask people whether or not you agree, we need more federal regulations on food date labels. People reported a 3.64 on the Likert scale, okay? However, if you look at people's agreement on the statement, whether food waste is a problem for the economy, for the environment, for the hungry or poor, you see that people mostly agree, okay? Most people actually agree with this statement to the largest extent. And it is particularly interesting, okay, to see that people agree that food waste can be reduced by consumers' effort, okay? To a larger extent, to a larger degree compared to they think we need more federal regulations for food date labels. And I wanted to highlight that result, okay? We also asked people why do they usually throw food away, and you see that rarely they throw food away for nutritional reasons, but they sometimes throw food away for taste reasons and safety reasons, so on and so forth, okay? Hopefully this can provide some information later on in designing messages and education messages, information to our consumers. All right, so next. Here's the one figure that everybody is waiting for, right? Okay, so this is the on the x-axis is the days after production. So the oldest product was 54 days after production, so 4 days after the expiration dates, and the youngest product at the time was 44 days after production, so 6 days before the expiration dates. Okay, and then on the y-axis, it was the willingness to pay for the product. So you can imagine that the higher the value, it means that people require a higher compensation to drink the product, meaning that their preference for that product decreases when this value is higher, okay? And then the different colors and shapes indicate the difference between subject treatments, okay? So as you can see here, okay, just to highlight several important behavioral trends that can be observed by this figure, okay? The first of all is the willingness to accept increases with the age of the product, okay? And this happens in all the treatments, okay? And the second is the slope remains similar before the expiration dates, as you can see from all 5 lines here before this line where the product expired, okay? So the slope remains similar before the expiration dates, but it went steeper, okay? It went steeper the day after in the 3 treatments with explicit expiration dates, okay? So that was the second main observation. And the third one is the pattern is similar across all 3 expiration date labels, all 3 explicit expiration date labels, okay? As you can see that whether it's best if used by or expires on, it remained flatter and then went steeper on the day after the, from the day after the expiration date, okay? And last but not least, with the production date plus shelf life, the behavioral pattern is similar to the production date only treatment. So as you can see here, these 2 lines that denote the production date plus shelf life and the production date only, these 2 lines stayed hand in hand together. Well, so I bet the question, right? Did people not want to process the information, although the information was provided to them on the same page, okay? Did people not want to do math? And I also back the question, okay? Going forward, if we can actually test the educational information and what can actually make people be more aware of the food waste or generally be more aware of the meaning of the expiration dates, would this be a good start point going forward? Because as of now, their behavioral patterns stay exactly the same and identical as if the expiration date labels don't exist. Okay, so now we then ran a few regressions to quantify the results and to perform statistical tests. Okay, and in this one, okay, we wanted to quantify how the freshness of a food product and the presence of an expiration date influence consumer preferences. So we estimate this random effects model, and here our focus is actually this betas here. Okay, so our focus is to estimate how the age of a product affect consumer willingness to pay under different expiration date labels. So if you look at this table here, which is the regression results, okay, you can see that as all the signs here for the coefficients are positive, meaning that as age goes up, age of a product goes up, the willingness to pay, the willingness to accept generally goes up. Okay, so people's preferences for older products generally goes down at a significant level. And you can see from these first two columns here, without an explicit expiration date label, the effects weren't statistically different before and after the expiration date. Okay, so we can see that although they're both significantly positive, you can see from the test statistics here that people did not distinguish their behavior pattern before and after the expiration date. And this is the same, okay? You can see how consistent the behavioral pattern was with the production date plus the shelf life. And then if you move on to the right-hand side of this, right side of this table, okay? With any of the expiration date label, okay? Such differences become significant. So you can see that here from the test statistics, people's behavior pattern before and after the expiration dates significantly changed, okay? And these are, again, pretty consistent no matter which expiration date you use. And I just wanted to highlight here as well, okay? If you look at the constant terms here, so without any explicit expiration date, you can see that people's willingness to accept was nearly zero, okay? But if you look at this constant term with the explicit expiration date, you can see that they are significantly negative, meaning that people are reasonable here, right? With the expiration dates, the average willingness to accept, if you consider the Tobin model and the tails, people actually have positive valuation for the product, okay? So here we then move on to test the demographic characteristics. Okay, this table shows that consumer responses to the age of a product do not vary by their demographic characteristics, and this is indicated by the statistical insignificance of all the demographic variables as well as their interaction terms with the days after the production. Okay, so also I wanted to pose the question, okay, what does this mean in real life when we actually come up with policy implications, knowing that, well, from this experiment that people's demographic characteristics did not really interact with their responses to different expiration dates and the expiration dates labels. All right, so now we reach our conclusions and discussions, okay? So a main result from this experiment was that perceived freshness has significant effects on consumer preferences for perishable products, okay? And here, consumer preferences decrease with the age of perishable products, and the slope is significantly different from zero before and after the expiration dates. Yet, the perceived freshness of food products is largely influenced by the existence and framing of expiration dates. And specifically, without the presence of an explicit expiration date, consumers have a steady, constant rate trend in their devaluation of perishable food as it ages. But the presence of an expiration date generally increased the valuation of a product before the date, but led to greater devaluing of older products. Okay, so now, so what? So first of all, since most products sold in the market have not passed their expiration dates, okay, explicit expiration date labels likely can increase consumer welfare if you think about it, right? Because people feel safer to consume the product before the expiration date if you make the expiration date explicit. Nevertheless, it'll be very important to design market strategies for products that are expired but are still safe to consume, right? So with the presence of expiration dates, people's devaluing of a product went dramatically faster after the expiration date. And considering that the deterioration of a food product is actually a continuous process instead of a discrete one, while people's valuation actually went much steeper after the expiration date, it will be very important to design the market strategies for those products after the date. And consumers are unlikely to distinguish among different expiration date, okay, languages without further education. As shown in our experiment, okay, the three proposed expiration dates used by, best if used by, and expires on, they were meant to actually convey different messages to our consumers of different degrees of safety concerns, so on and so forth. However, it is very clear from our experiment that consumers are unlikely going to distinguish among those different labelings. Okay. Well, it might be the case that with further education, people are going to be more likely to respond to them. Okay. So the discontinuous change in preferences occur on the day after the stamped date. Okay, so the slope went to change dramatically on the day after the stamped date, suggesting that price discounts on immediately consumed perishable goods should be offered on the day they expire. Okay, indicated from that graph that we are all waiting for. And with that, I'll conclude and take any questions. Thanks again.
Thank you, Dr. Lee. Appreciate that. Perfect timing. So we appreciate your time today and participation in the webinar. So we did have a few questions pop up in the chat, and a couple of just kind of clarification ones that I think you've addressed in part. We had one posted kind of early about, did the subjects, were they exposed to the actual product itself, or just pictures on a tablet? And when I think you addressed that, when you said, well, we're gonna make them drink it, so they
yep.
They actually had the product. So we had a couple of questions, and I may kind of start at the bottom and work back up. We had a couple of questions related to the demographic information. So one kind of general, were you surprised that the demographics didn't change the willingness to accept? And then a more specific one about the inclusion of that demographic information into the random effects, and a comment that they could be correlated with individual observables. So maybe address those in tandem.
Yeah. So just a clarification. The product were shown on the tablet, and so when they bid on the products, they did not see the actual products because we also have the non-information and baseline treatment. So of course, if they've already seen that date, we can't really just show them the production date, right? However, at the time, if they perform the test, then we show them the actual product, and there's no deception because everything can connect, right? The information actually connect to each other. So that's for that. And we were actually quite surprised at first that none of the demographic variables had any significant effect on people's behavior. But later we thought about it. There are many explanations why that happened, right? Because maybe people are so drawn. This is a field experiment, and people are so familiar with the setup. So maybe regardless of their demographic characteristics, they just responded to the expiration dates in the same way, because as long as you go to grocery stores and you're familiar with the setup, probably it is not that surprising after we actually digest the information. And that actually encouraged me to actually dig a little bit deeper, look at various interaction terms and so forth. And there is just no significant correlation of people's demographic characteristics and their behavior in our experiment, which is very interesting. Well, yeah, so I hope that I addressed that question well.
Yeah, good, thank you. So, and appreciate folks continuing to add questions here in the chat. We'll try to get to them. So, related to the willingness to accept framing, question I think Paul put in there. Do you worry that framing raises, the salience of the quote stigma of expiration date, and then that ends up exaggerating the willingness to consume the product after the expiration date?
Yeah, so I appreciate that question. Well, of course we are, right? We were at least. So that's exactly why at the time when we conducted the experiment, we actually threw in 2 other between subject treatments just for willingness to pay. And so first of all, we are not convinced that the stigma will actually contaminate our main findings, because the findings are really consistent regardless of the willingness to accept or willingness to pay treatments that we used. And also, well, we were concerned that people were going to potentially get stigmatized against the expiration dates if we ask them about the willingness to accept, but we're not convinced that there exists a better mechanism that can actually mitigate that potential stigma. Like using willingness to pay might result in people's stigma, because people, although it is a framed field experiment, people still know that they're participating in an experiment. So people were drawn to their attention to the expiration date labels because we also asked them 5 different ages, right? So with willingness to pay, our worry was actually, well, what if people just bid 0 because they were stigmatized against the expiration dates? So so that's why exactly we focused on willingness to accept, but then we also tested willingness to pay. Whenever you see a positive sign of the marginal effect on the willingness to accept, we observe that a negative sign occurred for the willingness to pay treatments. So yeah, so
I think you're cheating. So you're taking a peek at the chat. You actually addressed the next couple of questions that I was going to ask. So perfect.
Just so you know, I'm sharing my screen so I can't see them.
Yes. That's fantastic. So we had one come in, I think is really, really good. So, a question about, the discount for the products, but there was a question here about the size of the package. And I'll just read it. What was not clear is whether discounts should be larger in products sold in bigger packages. So the price discount for a pint of milk expiring today would be smaller than if it was 2 pints. So maybe you can address that.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent question, actually. So if you think about this, things that come with bigger packages, whether you're just buying those bigger packages because you have a larger family, or they're just available in bigger packages and you have to like consume it yourself for like a week. Versus if it's like in a smaller packages, all else equal, you can just finish it on the same day. So I would say this is actually back to the theoretical model of the T, right? So T is where you how long are you going to store it in your kitchen or in your fridge? And I would say the discount strategies will definitely be dependent on the expected, not the expected shelf life, but also the expected storage life in your own home. And I think, yeah, that's something we should definitely investigate into in the future.
Thanks. Circling back to something that was posted early on. So you mentioned when you gave the example of the yogurt that you bought, for yourself just last week or whatever, and talked about the point of shelf life is not as common in the United States. Why do you think that is?
I was always curious about that, because I mean, so like every time, so when we conducted this experiment, I was working at the University of Delaware, and my family, a lot of them, they live in Ontario. So every single time I consume some like Asian products in Ontario, it seems to be consistent that they always have this like 2 separate dates or what, somewhere saying, okay, this is a shelf life, and then somewhere really on the back of the package or somewhere it's hard to find, it's a production date. So I'm not sure if that's actually just one psychological game that the food producers play with their customers or consumers in a way. I'm not sure, because because usually I feel it's much more acceptable for me to drink something that has the 2 separate dates, because you don't do the math that exact, right? So, but again, we don't, I couldn't actually get a hold of those people and ask them why did that happen. So I don't have an answer to that question as of now, but I do think that's an interesting question that we should look into going forward. Maybe that is a strategy, or maybe that's just by incident. I'm not sure.
Yes, so thank you for that. Yeah, so I think we have we have about 9 or 10 more minutes. So if you have other questions or clarification for Dr. Lee, go ahead and drop it in there. And while we're waiting on folks to do that, the burning question is how tired of you of yogurt were you when you got done with this study, and what is your favorite kind?
I don't know. After this experiment, I lost my taste for yogurt drinks for a long time, and
Yeah.
And now I regained it because I found this a different version of strawberry yogurt, and
Yeah. All right. Well, Laura, maybe we'll go ahead and let's see. We've got so we've had a couple of folks drop in some comments, and you touched on it in your last answer. Kind of your you've identified a couple. Okay, these are pretty good questions. What's next in terms of this work?
yeah. So, well, there are definitely a lot of follow-up works after this one, right? The willingness to accept, willingness to pay paper. I can see that it's getting some interest from the audience, and we are trying to wrap up that project and try to convey the message and to do some formal statistical tests, and stay tuned. To not to give away too much, but what we found was using willingness to accept and willingness to pay, their marginal effects are pretty consistent, and they can convey the same or similar messages, and they're both really meaningful. So, and also along with the food labeling and food waste, we also have some follow-up questions, such as is it true that demographic variables are not going to interfere with people's behavioral responses to various expiration dates? We should probably design an experiment and actually more rigorously test that hypothesis. And also, since we know that people didn't seem to want to do the math, and they didn't want to respond to that separate dates, is it really possible that we wanted to dig deeper? Is it possible that it is a marketing strategy, or is there any way that we can play around with that labeling format? Is it possible that because they're so consistent with the behavioral pattern where it doesn't exist any expiration date labels, is that a very good starting point where we can actually design some educational treatments or informational treatments to see if going forward that is actually a very good starting point, and we can actually, well, test different varieties of those type of food labeling and see under education, under different information treatments, are people going to respond to those in a different way compared to the existing 3 proposed food labels, and whether or not that is actually a way to, if that is a marketing strategy, if that is true that the producers wanted to do that in order to encourage people to consume it like 1 or 2 days after the expiration dates, is it possible that is a better strategy to mitigate food waste and with some education?
So if you were going to walk in and advise a manufacturer this afternoon based on what you know now, what is this telling you on how they should set their expiration date and how to present that information?
I need to be careful here because it is hard for me to actually give a lot of assumptions and then give my conclusion in my answer to this question, right? But however, if you think about the evidence-based marketing strategy from this specific experiment, it seems like well, don't spend a lot of energy to try to distinguish different types of expiration date label language, right? Because whether it's expires on or used by or best if used by, if people are not going to respond to them in status quo, well, either you come up with a really salient educational information and change people's behavior, or you probably can actually use the time and resource to actually address this question from some alternative labeling or alternative treatments. And I would say that is my #1 message from this experiment, because that finding is pretty consistent.
Yeah, good. Laura, if you will, let's go ahead and throw that last slide up there. So Dr. Lee, thank you very much for your presentation and fantastic answers to the Q&A. Thank you all for submitting those. Just a couple of logistics questions that were asked. If you've been following the chat, I think you've probably seen them. Laura just dropped the link to the paper into the chat. And Laura, I think we can probably also include that on our posting on the CBEAR website, right? And speaking of that, this webinar was in fact recorded and it will be posted. I think Paul dropped that in earlier. It will be posted to our CBEAR website, which you see on the screen right now. So just another note of thanks for everybody participating. We've really enjoyed fantastic participation on all of these. And we hope you will come back and join us on March the 8th at 12 o'clock Eastern to hear Dr. Kelly Davidson. So thanks again for joining us and hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day.